Hey guys, tonight we drift through spice-slick desert winds, past camel caravans and flickering lanterns, to discover treasures so tiny they fit in your palm, but were once guarded like royal secrets. You trudge through fine dust, the air dry, enough to chap your lips in minutes, your eyes squinting against the glinting sands. All around you are the grumbles of pack animals, the creak of wood carts, and the muffled gossip of traders half asleep in their tents. You've arrived at a remote outpost somewhere between southern Arabia and the Horn of Africa. It's barely more than a cluster of tents and clay walls, but oh, the treasure's hidden here. You probably won't survive this journey, let's be honest. Most people didn't. Bandits, scorpions, and dehydration are just the welcome committee does so. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and what time you're watching this. I always love seeing where my sleepy travelers are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is sweet not from flowers, but from the soft musk of frankincense resin warming in a small ceramic burner. The scent is earthy, citrusy, and slightly medicinal. Frankincense and its movie cousin, myrrh, have been traded along the southern Silk Route for over 4,000 years. These aren't just perfumes, they're ancient currency. Tiny nuggets of hardened tree sap that can outvalue gold by weight. You reach into a pouch and feel them, irregular, golden pearl lumps with a faint stickiness, exuding ancient forest aromas. Locals once called frankincense the tears of the gods. Trees bosway is sacred, grow only in narrow rocky bands in Oman, Somalia, and Yemen. Their bark is slashed in sacred rituals. The sap bleeds slowly, dries in droplets, and is gathered by hand. Painstaking, slow, but essential. Myrrh, darker and more bitter, also comes from the Commiphora tree and smells like smoke and medicine had a very complicated baby. Egyptians used it in embalming, Greeks burned it for prayers, and Romans just threw it in everything from wine to wound treatment. You shuffle through a spice market, narrow stalls flanked by hanging bundles and carved boxes. A merchant grabs your arm gently, but firmly. He offers you a resin lump, insists on its power to banish demons, cure toothaches, and attract favor from the gods. You nod, mostly to escape his garlic breath. Here's the real kicker. Historians still argue whether the incense trade was the Silk Road's backbone, or merely a smoky side hustle. Some claim the route existed solely to feed the world's obsession with smell. Others say that's incense snob propaganda. Frankincense was carried by camel, loaded in heavy sacks, and passed from kingdom to kingdom like a sacred torch. Some caravans marched for months across terrifying terrain just to deliver a few kilos of this precious gunk. If that seems over the top, consider this. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder once wrote that Arabia sends no fewer than 3,000 talents of frankincense to the market annually. That's over 100 metric tons every year, all by foot and hoof. Even Queen Hatshepsut of Egypt, circa 1500 BCE, launched a trade expedition to the fabled land of Punt, probably Somalia, just to get more of this sweet-smelling treasure. Her ships returned piled with frankincense, ebony, gold, and baboons, naturally. Because what's a luxury spice run without a baboon or two? A few feet away, you notice a shrine. Nothing grand, just a flat stone surface with ashes and crushed resin. A traveling priest performs a quiet ritual, letting the smoke swirl upward into the desert twilight. It's believed that burning frankincense can purify a space and carry prayers directly to heaven. Like divine elevator music. Funny, isn't it? Today we spritz lavender mist on pillows and call it relaxation. Back then, entire religions depended on the right tree bleeding at the right time. And here's a quirky tidbit. In some regions, myrrh wasn't just burned or drunk, it was chewed. Yep, like ancient tree gum, travelers would soften a chunk between their teeth to freshen breath and ward off plague, or so they claimed. Imagine your dentist suggesting you gnaw on tree sap instead of flossing. You wander a little farther into the market, catching the scent of heated camel dung used unironically to fuel spice fires. Someone's roasting dates nearby, and a boy is hawking genuine Egyptian eyeliner, likely mixed with more frankincense dust than lead. Your feet ache and your canteen's half empty, but the night breeze is kinder now, and the stars are waking above the dunes. Somewhere far off, a caravan drum beats a slow rhythm, 3 pulses, then 2. That's the sound of fresh trade arriving. More resin, more stories, more scents that make people believe in gods or love or themselves. And tucked inside a merchant's pouch might be something completely unknown to modern shells. An old, forgotten lump that once shifted empires and now lies abandoned beneath museum dust. But not for you. You're here now, walking among the ghosts of forgotten spice trails, listening to whispers in the sand, and we've only just begun. You're not supposed to be here, really, not in the saffron fields of Persia under moonlight. But here you are ankle-deep in flowers, brushing past blooms so fragile they wilt if the sun catches them. The scent is somewhere between honey and hay, with a hint of something sharper underneath, a kind of richness that clings to your clothes. The pickers move silently beside you, women mostly, bundled in shawls, their hands dart like birds, fast, precise, and tireless. No tools, just fingers and muscle memory. They pluck only the vivid red threads, the stigmas from each pale purple crocus, leaving the rest of the flower untouched. One flower gives 3 tiny threads. It takes about 150 of these flowers to make a single gram of saffron. You do the math, slowly. Then you stop doing the math because it's depressing. Saffron isn't just expensive, it's ridiculous. Ounce for ounce, it still costs more than silver, sometimes more than gold. That much money for flower hairs. But here's the catch. It doesn't just dye food and give it flavor. It colors rituals. Burial cloths, royal robes. It was used in perfumes, in cosmetics, and even as a supposed aphrodisiac. You raisin. Eyebrow at that one because of course it was in the ancient Achaemenid courts of Persia. Saffron was stirred into rice, wine, and legend. It was sacred to the Zoroastrians. Alexander the Great supposedly bathed in it to heal battle wounds. Cleopatra soaked in saffron baths before meeting foreign dignitaries, though historians still argue whether that was for its skincare properties or its seductive potential. And let's not forget the saffron pirates. Yes, they were a thing. During the Black Death in 14th century Europe, saffron was so valuable that ships were hijacked for it. Armed men raided warehouses in Venice and Barcelona looking not for gold or coin, but barrels of orange dust. Talk about high-stakes seasoning. Your nose starts to itch. The dust from the drying threads tickles the back of your throat. You look toward a small stone building where fires burn softly beneath racks of drying saffron. The threads turn brittle. Their fragrance deepens. They'll be packed into wooden boxes and sent west through Anatolia, along the Levantine coast. Perhaps even down into North Africa. The silk routes were more than one road, and saffron walked most of them, from Kashmir to Khorasan to Cairo, Crete, and Constantinople. This spice left orange fingerprints on nearly every civilization it touched. You hear a sharp whistle. One of the pickers waves you over and hands you a small linen pouch, inside just a few strands of blood-red stigma, twisted like tiny threads of fire. She nods solemnly, then breaks into a grin. For your dreams, she says. You thank her, though you're not entirely sure it wasn't a bribe to leave before trampling more flowers. Here's a French tidbit for your growing collection. There's an old belief in Persia that saffron, if consumed at high doses, can bring on uncontrollable laughter or death. The line between comedy and tragedy has never been thinner. Some poets claim just smelling too much saffron could make you dizzy with joy. Others warn that too much saffron-laced food might make you bleed from the eyes. A rare dinner guest indeed. You stumble a little on the path back toward the village, your sandals catching on loose stones. Overhead, the sky is violet black and bursting with stars. In the distance, a jackal calls one sharp note into the night, then silence. The pickers continue their work, unfazed, like they're part of some ancient rhythm that predates timekeeping, and you foreign, modern. This place can't help but feel like saffron is still working its spell on you. It's in the air, in your thoughts, maybe even under your fingernails. And it's very possible you'll never smell risotto the same way again. A few facts get blurry here, like saffron's exact origin. Historians still argue whether it first bloomed in Bronze Age Crete or the slopes of Kashmir. The evidence is scattered frescoes in Santorini, temple texts in India, graves in Persia dusted with red. But one thing's clear, wherever it started, it traveled far and fast. And not just for royalty. Even humble households in medieval Spain used saffron to color bread and soups, a kind of edible sunlight for cold, gray winters. It was said to bring cheer, enhance memory, and lift humors, whatever that means. Probably the medieval equivalent of brain fog. As you return to the village, you notice someone sprinkling saffron into tea, just a few threads, The brew turns a glowing amber, the kind of color you'd wear to a wedding if you were feeling dramatic. A sip and you taste warmth, bitterness, and a strange, lingering sweetness. It's complex, like memories you don't fully remember, but still feel homesick for. In a nearby courtyard, an elder tells a story to children gathered around a fire. You catch snippets of it, something about a princess whose tears became crocus blossoms, something about a fox that stole fire and hid it in saffron petals. Mist cling to spices like static cling to a sweater, and for good reason. These weren't just ingredients, they were maps, memories, medicine, and magic. You lie back on a woven mat, the heat from the day still pulsing up from the stone beneath you. You let the scent of saffron and wood smoke carry you. Somewhere in your pouch are those few fragile threads, red gold, they called it, but for tonight, it's just a whisper in the wind, a story pressed between petals. The air is thick with salt and wind as you walk a crumbling coastline, your sandals crunching over broken pottery and dried seaweed. A gull cries out overhead, and waves slap rhythmically against warm black rocks. This place serene, once a jewel of ancient Libya, is a ruin now, but the stories it whispers are far from dead. You stop beside a strange carving, part plant, part torch, almost like an artichoke sketched by someone who had only heard of one secondhand. That's silphium, or rather, that was silphium. No one knows for sure what the plant looked like. It's been extinct for over 1,000 years, maybe longer, but at one time, this spice was worth more than its weight in silver, maybe even gold. A miracle seasoning, a cure-all, a treasure so essential that the city of Serene stamped it onto its coins. Imagine minting money with a vegetable. You brush your hand against the brittle soil. Somewhere here, silphium once grew wild, nourished by sea fog and divine luck. The ancient Greeks and Romans adored it. They shaved it into stews, mixed it into wine, rubbed it on sore muscles, and if the more colorful sources are to be believed, used it as birth control. Yeah, that kind of birth control. The idea that a plant could prevent pregnancy isn't entirely far-fetched. Modern science backs the concept of phytoestrogens in some herbs. Silphium might have been rich in them, or maybe people just really wanted it to be true. Historians still argue whether it actually worked, or whether it was just wishful chewing. You reach into your satchel and pull out a small dried root, a distant cousin of silphium, maybe Ferula asafoetida. The smell hits you instantly, like garlic and sulfur had a sweaty argument. Asafoetida is still used today, especially in Indian cooking, where it's known as hing and used to flavor lentils and curries. But back in the Roman world, it was considered a weak substitute for the real deal, kind of like how carob is to chocolate, sad, functional, but not fooling anyone. Silphium's fame was so great that Julius Caesar supposedly stockpiled hundreds of pounds of it in the Roman treasury. Nero, that delightful maniac, is said to have consumed the last known stock himself because of course he did, burn the empire, eat the last of the world's favorite plant, and call it a day. You pass a half-buried amphora, its side worn smooth by wind. You imagine what it once carried, silphium-infused oil, wine laced with the root's tangy fire. Recipes from that era describe the spice as having a flavor somewhere between leek, garlic, and pleasure. That last part's a bit vague, but you get the idea. Even ancient chefs wax poetic. Apicius, the Roman cookbook guy, think Gordon Ramsay, in a toga, used silphium in everything from sauces to seafood. Without it, half his dishes lose their spark. You wonder if Roman food would bland the same way modern kitchens die when someone forgets the salt. Here's a quirky detail to chew on. Some scholars believe the heart shape we use today to represent love Valentine's cards, emoji, awkward, teenage doodles might come from the seed pod of the silphium plant. A visual pun, maybe, or a tribute to the spice that warmed food and loins in equal measure. You climb a low ridge overlooking the sea. The sun's dropping fast, bleeding into the horizon like saffron tea. Below, scattered ruins sleep in shadow, and in the distance, a few goats pick their way across scrubby hills. They might be nibbling the nearest surviving relatives of silphium, though those have none of its mythical potency, just stubborn bitterness and goat breath. Somewhere behind you, an archaeologist with dusty boots and more optimism than funding argues into a phone about new pollen samples. It might be silphium, you hear her say, but she doesn't sound convinced. Historians still argue whether silphium really went extinct, or whether it simply became unrecognizable over centuries of hybridization and migration. Plants mutate, people forget, recipes fade, and one day, A flavor that once ruled the known world becomes a ghost. You wonder if the last farmers of Serene cried when the last plant withered. Maybe they held a small ceremony, maybe they shrugged and moved on to coriander, or maybe no one noticed until it was too late. A caravan arrived, the traders asked for silphium, and the farmers said, "It hasn't grown this year," and meant it. That's the danger with miracles. You get used to them, you expect them, and when they're gone, all that's left is a name and a story and a bitter root that isn't quite the same. You stand for a long moment, letting the wind whip around you. It carries the salt of the sea and something sharper, a ghost of garlic and resin. And something deeper, something stranger. Maybe it's your imagination, maybe it's memory, passed down through soil and story, or maybe silphium isn't gone, after all, just hiding, waiting for someone to remember what it meant. You're somewhere deep in the forests of the Indian subcontinent now, moving through thick undergrowth where vines tangle like snakes, and the air is heavy with green dampness. You duck under palm fronds and slap away a mosquito the size of a paperclip. Your guide doesn't talk much, but he grins when he sees your boots caked in mud. You'll smell like pepper for days, he says, cheerfully unhelpful dot, and not just any pepper. You're here for long pepper, a spice you've probably never tasted. Even if you think you know your way around a grinder dye at first glance, it looks weird, like someone accidentally let black pepper grow into weird pinnacombs. They're little clusters cake-shaped, dark brown, wrinkled, and oddly satisfying to roll between your fingers. One sniff, your eyes water. This isn't just sharp, it's piercing. Back in the day, this stuff was it. Long pepper, piper longum, was the spice that got the ancient Greeks and Romans absolutely buzzing. Before black pepper became the default king of spice racks, this was what every elite kitchen craved. Romans shaved it into sauces. Greeks ground it into medicine. And let's be real, it's so hot it probably started more than one kitchen fire. You reach a clearing where a few farmers are tending to pepper vines spiraling up wooden stakes. The plants curl like they're climbing toward secrets, and the long peppers hang in pairs or threes, ready for harvest. A woman hands you one. Fresh, she says. You bite. Immediate regret. Your tongue feels like it just licked the sun. Historically, long pepper was imported into Europe via Persia and Arab traders, who kept its true source a tightly guarded secret. Europeans didn't know India from Eden, and long pepper seemed like proof of paradise. By the time it reached Venice or Constantinople, it could cost more per ounce than precious metals. You pass a low hut where drying racks are covered in the pepper's knobby bodies. The smell hits like incense, and vinegar had a baby. Long pepper was used in everything from mummification balms to love potions, and, allegedly, as a cure for the plague. Though honestly, if your healer prescribed spicy pinnacombs for the Black Death, maybe it was time for a second opinion. And here's a wild twist: historians still argue whether long pepper and black pepper were often confused, or whether their names were used interchangeably in trade documents, a spice with identity issues. How modern. You pause at a carving etched in the stone, an elephant with a mouth full of what looks suspiciously like pepper vines. In ancient Ayurvedic texts, long pepper appears over and over as a hot medicine, good for digestion, energy, circulation, a sort of ancient Red Bull, minus the taurine and existential dread. But long pepper didn't just vanish overnight. It faded. As maritime trade improved, black pepper became easier to transport, easier to store, and frankly less terrifying to the tongue. Long pepper, with its fire and funk, lost the popularity contest. By the 17th century, it was a historical footnote. Today, you'll still find it in some regional Indian and Indonesian cuisines, and in obscure apothecaries that smell like mystery novels. But in most places, forgotten. You kneel beside a trader's satchel, one of those worn, patched kinds that's seen more countries than your passport. Inside are bundles of dried long pepper wrapped in banana leaves. He hands you one like it's a sacred object, then adds with a wink, "Don't snort it." Noted. Here's a French tidbit to warm your inner trivia hoarder. During the Middle Ages, long pepper was sometimes sprinkled onto meat, not just for taste but to disguise rot. This is what happens when refrigeration hasn't been invented and spice traders charge like it's eBay bidding night. Meat to far gone, just pepper the truth. And let's not forget the kings, particularly those in medieval Europe who went wild for the spice. Henry III of England once demanded his merchants ensure he had a year's supply of long pepper lest the royals to lose its vigor. Actual quote, no. But he might have said it if he knew how good it tasted with roasted duck. You continue walking through the shade, ducking under trees while monkeys chatter above, clearly unimpressed by your culinary curiosity. Somewhere nearby, someone is boiling rice with long pepper, cardamom, and ginger. The aroma sharp and sweet and old. It smells like medicine, comfort, and something you can't quite place. Maybe history. There's an odd satisfaction in knowing you've just met one of spice history's original celebrities. Long pepper was once the reason empires sent ships, why explorers mapped coastlines, and why a few traders definitely got very rich while smelling very spicy. You look back at the forest behind you, thick with shadow and heat. It's easy to forget how much of history grew in quiet, green places like this. Easy to forget how something so small could command so much power, but that's the story of spice. Ordinary-looking things that change the shape of the world. You're riding a creaky wagon now, the kind with one wheel that keeps wobbling like it's trying to escape. The air is thick and sweet as honey, but layered with something sharp and peppery that clings to your nose and doesn't let go. You're in West Africa specifically, somewhere near what's now Ghana or Sierra Leone, and your guide is humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby with a warning baked in. You pull out a cloth pouch and shake it. Out tumble small, reddish-brown seeds, about the size of peppercorns but smoother, more polished. These are grains of paradise, and despite the poetic name, they have nothing to do with Eden, unless your idea of heaven involves burning your tongue and clearing your sinuses at the same time. These spicy seeds come from a plant in the ginger family, Aphramoma meligueta, and for a few glittering centuries, they were Europe's best-kept not-so-legal secret. The taste? Imagine black pepper had a fling with cardamom and then raised a baby in a fire pit. Spicy, yes, but also citrusy, floral, and just a bit mischievous. It's the kind of thing that makes your taste buds sit up straight and salute. You arrive at a riverside marketplace where woven baskets brim with these seeds. Local traders crack jokes and slap each other's backs while mixing grains of paradise with cola nuts, dried fish, and ghost skin drums. It's bustling, chaotic, alive. A kid tries to sell you a magic pepper grinder. It's made of bone. Probably not magical. Probably not entirely hygienic either. Back in medieval Europe, these seeds were exoticized to the point of hysteria. When black pepper imports dwindled during wartime or political drama, which, let's face it, was all the time, Europeans turned to grains of paradise as a substitute. The taste was close enough, and the name, utter marketing gold. The name itself comes from a rather creative batch of 14th century Venetian traders who claimed the spice grew near the Garden of Eden, not just near it on the edge. Like, you can smell heaven from here levels of close. They even forged maps with it labeled Paradisum Granorum. Bold move. Historians still argue whether this marketing ploy actually tricked monarchs or if kings just enjoy being lied to if the food tasted better. Monks got in on the action too. In some abbeys, grains of paradise were added to beer and medicine, despite certain papal bans on spicy distractions. One record even claims monks used it as an ingredient in holy water. Probably not church-approved, but hey, blessed fire. On the tongue sounds like a solid sermon metaphor. Here's a quirky little rabbit hole for you. Grains of paradise were also used to cheat, specifically in ale production. Brewers in England would sneak it into batches of cheap beer to give it a sharp bite and pass it off as high-quality stuff. This led to a literal act of parliament in 15th century England that forbade its use. In ale, you heard that right, this humble spice was officially too spicy to trust. You wander past a stall where a Graitan oral historian tells a story about the origin of the spice. He says a fire goddess once wept tears of gold into the soil, and wherever they fell, these fiery seeds sprang up. It's not science, exactly, but somehow it feels just as accurate as what's in your old world history textbook. Here's the fringe detail you didn't ask for but now can't unlearn. In the 19th century, grains of paradise were ground and fed to racehorses in England, supposedly to make them run faster. Spices as performance enhancers. Talk about literal horsepower. And despite being slowly pushed aside by the now dominant black pepper, grains of paradise have never fully disappeared in West African cooking. They're still used to spice fish, soups, and stews. In fact, some celebrity chefs in the West have rediscovered them, touting their flavor like it's some lost culinary relic, which, to be fair, it kind of is. You sit beside the river now, chewing a roasted yam spiced with crushed grains of paradise. It tingles on your lips, dances on your tongue, and leaves a warmth that lingers longer than it should. The sun's dipping low, casting golden streaks across the water, and you watch traders pack up their wares, stuffing baskets and securing carts for the next day's journey inland. You think back to that act of Parliament, the monks with their spicy beer, the Edge of Eden travel brochures from Venice, all that drama, for something that grows quietly in humid forests and tastes like a secret. And maybe that's the magic. Grains of paradise were never the loudest, or the most enduring, or the easiest to farm, but they had style, they had swagger, they were the pepper that showed up to the banquet in silk slippers and dropped just enough heat to make you feel alive. Not bad for a seed you can still buy today if you know where to look. The air smells like seawater and wet rope as you crouch behind a stack of crates. In a creaky old port on the edge of Java, you're trying not to breathe too loudly because technically you're witnessing a spice deal that shouldn't be happening. Not because the spice is dangerous though it is spicy, and not because it's illegal in itself. No, the problem is that these traders are passing it under the nose of a European embargo, one set up by religious authorities who decided that cubeb berries were a little too foreign. The crates creak as a burly man in a headscarf lifts the lid and reveals what looks like peppercorns with tiny tails. That's cubeb. Some call it tailed pepper. Once upon a time, it was the darling of spice markets from Alexandria to Antwerp, until it became a symbol of the wrong kind of belief. You pop one in your mouth. Bad idea. It's bitter, camphor-like, with a hint of allspice and a slight floral zing. Not terrible, just intense, like chewing on peppercorns while getting scolded by your grandma. Cubeb piper cubeba grows in Java and Sumatra, trailing like ivy up the trees. It was a staple of Arab spice trade networks as early as the 9th century, passed along with incense and silk into the Mediterranean world. By the Middle Ages, cubeb had a serious fanbase in Europe. Physicians praised it for its warming qualities. Apothecaries used it in tinctures for everything from coughs to kidney stones. Chefs tossed it into meat pies and sauces like it was going out of style, which, unfortunately, it soon did. You peek around the crate and see the trader hand over a leather pouch to a European buyer with a patchy beard and a look that says, "I definitely shouldn't be here." And he shouldn't, because by the 14th century, the Catholic Church had begun pushing back against Islamic spice merchants, trying to reroute trade through safer, Christian-aligned channels. Cubeb got swept up in the politics. It wasn't just spicy, it was suspicious. Historians still argue whether cubeb was banned purely for religious reasons, or whether it was simply too closely tied to Arab medicine and Muslim mysticism. Either way, by the 1500s, it was out of European favor, displaced by black pepper, cinnamon, and clove. Some sources even claim that Pope John XXI denounced its use altogether, though whether that actually happened or is just anti-spice gossip remains up for debate. But that didn't stop smugglers. You move through the alleyways of the port, where whispers of cubeb float between spice bundles, betel nuts, and sandalwood. It was smuggled in sacks labeled as black pepper, hidden beneath fish, or tucked into oil flasks. Traders wrapped it in wax paper, sewed it into linings, even disguised it in religious relics. If it hadn't been so deeply fragrant, they might have gotten away with it more often. Here's a quirky tidbit. Cubeb was once used in love spells. Not metaphorical ones either, actual spell recipes, written in Renaissance Latin, called for grinding cubeb with rose petals and binding it in silk to attract affection. You can't help but picture some 15th century baker slipping a spice tart to a crush and hoping for fireworks, even after its culinary fall from grace. Cubeb found new life in unexpected corners. By the 1800s, it was showing up in Europe again, not in stews, but in cigarettes. Cubeb cigarettes were marketed as soothing for asthma, bronchitis, and nervous conditions. Imagine puffing spicy pepper smoke to calm your nerves. Bold move. You stop by a Javanese herbalist's shack where bundles of dried cubeb hang like garlands. The woman inside grinds the berries into a paste and rubs it on a small child's chest. Apparently, it's still a common local remedy for chest colds. The scent is so strong it makes your eyes water. Effective? Probably. Comfortable? Nope. You sip a tiny clay cup of tea infused with cubeb and lemongrass. The flavor is bracing, like waking up face first in a spice market. You ask about recipes, and the herbalist tells you that older generations used cubeb in wedding dishes and as a purifying agent in traditional rituals. Spicy, spiritual, medicinal, classic triple threat. The sun sets fast in the tropics. The port transforms into something mythic, all firelight and shadow. With the hiss of tide against hull and the faint sound of someone playing a bamboo flute nearby, traders close up their stalls. Smugglers, let's call them creative vendors, gather. In candlelit backrooms, you realize now that Cubeb wasn't just forgotten. It was erased in some places, deliberately left out of the evolving recipe of global trade. Black Pepper had the better PR team, Cinnamon had the royal favor, but Cubeb had secrets, history, and bite. You walk past a dock dow, its sail furled, its hold stuffed with something wrapped in banana leaves. You could swear the air around it carries that same bitter heat, the ghost of a spice that once rolled the spice rack and now lingers only in corners, in whispers. In the taste of a tea most people wouldn't recognize. It's not gone, not completely, just waiting for someone curious enough to buy it. It starts with a breeze off the Aegean, salty, sweet, and touched with something almost lemony, something haunting. You follow it up a winding path flanked by low stone walls and the stubborn green of scrubby trees. The island is Chios, and the trees you're passing aren't olives, though you be forgiven for thinking so. No, these are mastic trees, and they cry for a living. You pause at one of them. The bark has been scored in neat slashes, and from each cut, thick resin seeps slowly down like the tree is sweating in pearls. The drops harden in the sun, forming irregular crystals like frozen teardrops. These are mastic tears, not a nickname. That's what people actually call them. You crouch and gently touch one of the drops. It's hard but sticky, and as you bring your fingers to your nose, the scent hits, clean, fresh, piney, with a citrus lift and a hint of something antiseptic. Think of a Greek farce bottle and refined. You chew it, because that's what they've done here for over 2,000 years. And it's weird, but nice. It softens in your mouth into something like chewing gum, only more fragrant, more herbal. Ancient Greeks and Romans did the same, partly to clean their teeth, partly to sweeten their breath, and partly because why not? You pass a grove where women in wide-brimmed hats kneel in the dirt, scraping dried mastic into little bowls with curved knives. Their movements are calm, ritual-like. These aren't farmers, not in the usual sense. They're gatherers of tears and mastic. It only bleeds here, in southern Chios. No other region, no matter how similar the climate, has managed to reproduce it. Historians still argue whether it's the soil, the salt, or just the stubbornness of the tree. In the nearby village of Pyrgi, the walls are painted with geometric patterns, black and white zista, that look like medieval wallpaper come to life, and every door, every window ledge, carries the faint scent of mastic, especially during the harvest season. It's used in everything from laukumi Greek Turkish delight to liqueurs, toothpaste, and even ice cream. That flavor, it's not quite mint, not quite vanilla, not quite anything. It just is. You wander into a shop where an old man gestures. You inside. He doesn't speak your language, but he doesn't need to. He points to his shelves. And you see jars of mastic oil, mastic soap, mastic crab cheese. Then he holds up something strange, a chunk of old beeswax embedded with mastic and clove. He pantomimes chewing and then mimics a toothache disappearing. Medicine and breath freshener in one bite. Here's your fringe tidbit. Mastic was once so highly valued by the Ottomans that stealing it was punishable by death. Chios was considered such a vital spice hub that when the island was attacked, Suleiman the Magnificent reportedly issued orders not to burn the mastic groves. Priorities, right? But the island's relationship with its tears hasn't always been peaceful. You pass the ruins of an old Genos watchtower. For centuries, the Genos controlled Chios for one reason: monopoly over mastic. They taxed it, guarded it, built entire economies around it. The spice wasn't just currency, it was leverage. During Ottoman rule, mastic production was controlled by a kind of medieval corporation called the Mastichoria, a confederation of villages with special rights. Growers were required to deliver their resin quotas each season, and records were kept as obsessively as banking ledgers. If a single gram went missing, people noticed and probably panicked. You sit beneath one of the trees now, its branches casting dappled shadows across your lap. In your hand is a little mastic sweet like a gumdrop, but more herbal, more ancient. You suck on it slowly, letting the flavor spread, and as the sun begins to set behind the hills, turning the water below into molten bronze, you feel something settle. Mastic isn't dramatic like pepper. It doesn't set your mouth on fire or make kings demanding a sword point, but it lingers, soft, steady, a survivor. Here's a detail you probably didn't expect. Mastic is still used today in Eastern Orthodox Christian rituals, particularly in the sacred oils used to anoint the faithful. That scent you couldn't place in the cathedral might have been this ancient resin, and even now, in high-end culinary circles, chefs are rediscovering it, grating it into desserts, melting it into sauces, reawakening its old ghosts. Maybe one day it'll be mainstream again, but honestly, it seems perfectly happy being forgotten by most, remembered by few. You reach into your pouch and find a few small tears, already gathering a thin film of dust. You cup them in your palm and let the wind lift their scent back toward the sea. You breathe deep, you remember, and you let the trees keep their secrets for another night. Dust swirls around your feet as the caravan snakes up a hill in the Levant. Somewhere between ancient Damascus and the rugged folds of southern Anatolia, the donkeys grunt. The sun beats down like it's personal. You haven't bathed in days, and the only thing more relentless than the heat is the smell wafting from the trader's lunch, something earthy, lemony, and mouth-wateringly sour. He tears a chunk of bread, scoops up a bit of roasted lamb, and sprinkles on a fine, red-purple powder. He sees you watching and grins. Sumac, he says, offering you a pinch like it's treasure, and it kind of is. You pop it on your tongue, and bam, there it is, tart like lemon, sharp like vinegar, but with a dusty floral twist that makes you blink twice. It's not spicy, it's not sweet, it's not like anything you've tasted before, and it's everywhere here. Dusted over grilled meats, stirred into yogurt, baked into flatbreads. It's ancient, humble, and for some reason, almost completely forgotten outside this corner of the world. Sumac isn't even a true spice by some definitions. It comes from the dried berries of the rice plant, crushed into powder. The berries grow wild, in clusters like wine grapes, turning deep crimson as they ripen. They thrive on stony hillsides and thrive even more in kitchens where citrus was a luxury. Too precious to squeeze. You stop to rest at a hilltop market, where clay jars of sumac sit beside figs, walnuts, and crumbling white cheese. A woman in a dark scarf scoops a heap of the powder into a paper cone and hands it to you. For eggs, she advises, pointing to a bubbling copper skillet. You take a bite and nearly fall over. Who knew breakfast could slap you with this much flavor? The Romans knew it. They used sumac before lemons were common, for both flavor and medicine. Pliny the Elder listed it in his encyclopedic works, always a solid sign that something mattered. Sumac was prized for its astringency and its ability to clean wounds, dye fabric, and jazz up meat that might be, let's say, past its prime. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. Medieval physicians believed sumac cooled hot temperaments, not metaphorical ones, actual bodily humors. You know, the kind that floated around inside you, making you either melancholy or violent, depending on your diet and star sign. Sumac was a cure-all for heat, fever, sumac, agitation, sumac, spicy stigat to spicy, you guessed it, sumac. The spice caravans carried it by the sackful down from the Anatolian highlands, through Aleppo, across to Jerusalem, and on to Cairo and Constantinople. Traders used it to barter, flavor food, and even preserve other goods. The acid in sumac could slow the spoilage of meats. Think of it as nature's seasoning and fridge. You sip water from a goatskin pouch and watch a group of merchants making a midday salad. Tomatoes, onions, parsley, olive oil, and a sumac dressing that turns the whole thing into a citrus symphony. No vinegar, no lemon, just sumac. It makes you wonder how many chefs today could cook an entire meal if you took away all acids, except this one. Historians still argue whether sumac was cultivated intentionally or simply gathered wild across centuries. It grows easily, invasively even, in some places. It's treated like a weed, but not here. Not where it's woven into tradition like salt or bread. You pass a small shrine built into a rock face. An old woman burns something in a clay dish. The smell is unmistakable, sharp, herbal, almost smoky, sumac, mixed with dried herbs and olive oil. Used as a kind of incense or offering. Not common today, but not entirely gone either. There's always that one elder who remembers how things used to be. Your fingers are stained now. The sumac dust sticks like chalk. You find yourself licking your thumb, savoring every tiny spark of flavor. It's the kind of thing you didn't know you were missing until it slapped you awake. And here's a little French curveball for you. In North America, there's a related Plantrus glabra, or staghorn sumac, that indigenous communities have used for centuries in medicinal teas and tart beverages. Different species, but same tongue-tingling family. So this forgotten spice may not be forgotten at all, just living parallel lives across continents. As dusk settles, you help unload the donkeys. The caravan leader pulls out a flatbread. Wrapped in a cloth, tears it open, and hands you a piece. It's warm, fluffy, and liberally dusted with za'atar, a mixture of wild thyme, sesame, salt, and, of course, sumac. The flavor blooms in your mouth like wildfire. You realize then that sumac isn't loud. It doesn't punch like chili or perfume like saffron. It lifts. It pulls brightness out of dullness, cuts through heaviness, wakes up whatever it touches, and maybe that's why it never got the same PR campaign as cinnamon or cloves. It didn't need a royal endorsement or a religious band to make its mark. It just quietly made food better. As the stars emerge above the hills, you sit by the fire and watch sumac dust swirl in the breeze like dessert perfume. The meal is simple, the night is quiet, and the spice unforgettable, even if most of the world has forgotten it. The monsoon hits just after dawn. Rain slaps the palm leaves like it's mad at them, and the sky turns the color of weak chai. You're knee-deep in slick red mud, trying not to fall as you push through a ginger field on the outer edge of what was once the Khmer Empire. The rain has that warm, metallic smell that only happens in tropical climates, but beneath it, something else cuts through, sharp, peppery, piney, almost medicinal, almost delicious. You kneel and dig your fingers into the damp earth, gently unearthing a rhizome that looked like ginger's bulkier, spikier cousin. This is galangal, and you're about to meet Southeast Asia's unsung culinary hero. If ginger is your friendly spice next door, galangal is its weirder, wilder older sibling who moved to the jungle and started studying plants. The flavor, more potent, earthier, notes of citrus, pine, menthol, and black pepper all wrapped into one root that looked like it could double as a weapon. If thrown hard enough. Back in medieval Europe, galangal was everywhere and now mostly unknown to anyone who hasn't ordered Thai tom yum soup or studied herbal medicine. Like a medieval monk with too much time. Funny how the world forgets its former obsessions. A nearby cook stirs a pot over an open fire, the steam rising. From the broth smells like lemongrass, lime leaves, chilies, and thick slices of galangal. Their skin half peeled, bobbing like spicy driftwood. You're handed a bowl and take a cautious sip. Your sinuses clear instantly. Your brain does a little tap dance. Yep, that's galangal all right. The root is native to Southeast Asia, especially Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. It was known in the spice trade routes as early as the 9th century, riding caravans and ships westward alongside cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg. In medieval Europe, it became so trendy it earned a nickname, the spice of life. Doctors praised it, poets rhymed about it, and monks hoarded it like it was sacred. Here's a quirky tidbit. The famous Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century abbess, mystic, composer, and all-around herbal enthusiast, was a huge fan of galangal. She prescribed it for all ailments of the heart, which could mean cardiovascular issues, heartbreak, or just a general case of the medieval blues. You pass through a tiny village where galangal roots hang dry from woven baskets. There, sent fighting through the rain, an old man waves you over to show his prized stash, thinly sliced, sun-dried galangal that smells like ancient medicine and good curry. He tells you it's still used in wedding feasts and healing rituals. He swears it balances your kai, or your gallbladder. His accent is thick, and you're not entirely sure which. Either way, you nod respectfully. Historians still argue whether the galangal mentioned in medieval texts is the same species used today, or whether multiple varieties got jumbled together in translation. There's greater galangal, Alpinia galanga, and lesser galangal, Kaempferia galanga. And the spice lexicon of 12th century Europe didn't exactly have a standard dictionary. One thing's certain, Europeans loved it for a while. Galangal was used in sauces, wines, and meat rubs. The spice even found its way into hippocras, a medieval spice wine that sounds festive, but probably tasted like mulled regret. You imagine some overly ambitious chef in 1270 stirring a pot of pigeon stew and muttering, "Needs more galangal." But like long pepper, galangal got quietly nudged off the stage by its simpler, easier to market cousin ginger. Ginger shipped better, stored longer, and played more nicely with sweet European palates. Galangal, too bold, too strange, too Southeast Asian for the increasingly European-centered spice scene. And yet here, in this muddy stretch of earth and fog, it's never left. Locals crush it into curry pastes, steep it in tonics, use it as insect repellent. and slice it thin for fish stews that taste like thunder and memory. It's alive in a way that supermarket ginger just isn't. You take another sip of your soup and realize your lips are tingling slightly. It's not heat, it's that menthol hum, the same sensation you get from mint, but darker, deeper, more rooted. It's strangely addictive. A woman nearby hands you a small wrapped bundle banana leaf, tied with twine. Inside, dried galangal. Chips, still faintly fragrant despite the damp air. She tells you it's for your travels. So you remember what spice is supposed to taste like. She jokes, you laugh, but it stays with you. Galangal doesn't just flavor, it haunts. It's the spice equivalent of an old friend you forgot you missed. And just before you leave the village, someone offers you a galangal and honey tea. You take a sip, and for a moment, it feels like the rain lightens. The flavor isn't friendly. It's fierce, like the jungle, like history, like a root that refuses to be tamed. You turn back once before heading down the road. The field is misted now, the galangal leaves trembling under light drizzle. Another forgotten treasure, another name buried in trade ledgers and ancient recipes. But it never left, it just waited. You arrive at the end of your journey not with a feast, but with a sniff, a deep, confused sniff. Because what you're smelling is awful and expensive, very, very expensive. You're in a coastal town now, could be Arabia, could be Zanzibar, could be somewhere near the edge of the Indian Ocean. The market here doesn't glitter with gold or perfume with lavender. It stinks, literally. Not in a bad day at the fishmonger way, but in a way that suggests something has gone horrendously wrong with biology. This final chapter isn't about seeds or roots or bark. It's about two spices, if you can even call them that aren't grown in soil, but come from animals. From their most fragrant orifices, to be precise. Say hello to ambergris and civet. You wander past rows of merchants hawking bundles of cinnamon and dried hibiscus until you find a curious corner where glass vials glint in the sunlight. One bottle is sealed tight, and when you cautiously uncork it, you recoil. The scent is like moldy seaweed that fell in love with musk and then aged for 10 years in a whale's intestines, which, fun fact, is basically what ambergris is. Ambergris is produced inside the gut of a sperm whale, possibly as a response to indigestible squid beak. Sand is later vomited or excreted into the ocean, where it drifts for years, hardening in salt and sun. Eventually, it washes ashore as waxy, gray lumps that look like nothing special until you smell them, or sell them, or both. Despite its origins, ambergris was once one of the most expensive substances on Earth. Kings used it in medicine. Perfumers prized it for its fixative powers, and most baffling of all, chefs used it to flavor food. Yes, food. The Arabs were among the first to elevate it to legendary status. In the 1001 Nights, ambergris is sprinkled into dishes to honor sultans and seduce lovers. Later, in Renaissance Europe, it was mixed into chocolate, syrups, and even scrambled eggs. Historians still argue whether people genuinely liked the taste or were just flexing their wealth. But ambergris isn't the only animal-derived oddity on your spice tour. You step into a darker alley where a merchant in gold-threaded robes pulls back a cloth to reveal a shallow dish of grayish paste. The smell here is different, sharp, sour, musky in a way that feels almost uncomfortably personal. This is civet. Civet paste is secreted from the perineal glands of the African civet cat. It's collected traditionally through some rather undignified means and used as a base note in perfumery. But before it hit French fragrance labs, it hit the spice markets, especially in medieval Arab and Indian medicine. Civet was used in incense, elixirs, and yes, sometimes food. You back away slightly. The merchant laughs, powerful. No. You nod, wondering whether your eyebrows will ever recover. Here's your French tidbit for this final round. Queen Elizabeth I reportedly favored ambergris in her sweetmeats. That means the Virgin Queen probably enjoyed whale vomit bombings while watching Shakespeare plays. History has range. Meanwhile, in Mule, India, both ambergris and civet were considered aphrodisiacs. They were sprinkled into sherbets, massaged into oils, and added to rice dishes at royal banquets. The line between spice and perfume blurred completely. If it smelled intoxicating, someone probably ate it. You pause at a small table where a trader grinds something into powder, half ambergris, half crushed rose petals. It's for a spice blend called muatter, used in ancient Middle Eastern cuisines to flavor stews and rice. The scent is bizarrely addictive. You lean in, you lean back out. Your senses are confused, but curious. Historians still argue whether these substances qualify as spices at all. They weren't always edible. They weren't always safe. But they moved along the same roads, commanded the same prices, and were wrapped in the same mystique. You sit at a tea stall where the owner offers you a small, cloudy cup. Inside, milk, honey, cardamom, and the tiniest trace of ambergris. The taste is rich and velvety, and though you know what's in it, part of you doesn't want to care. You sip slowly, letting the flavors bloom, a sweetness behind the spice, a softness behind the scent. In the end, you realize that spices weren't always about taste. They were about power, desire, magic, identity. They were used to heal, to poison, to worship, to seduce. They were flags of status and whispers of survival. And some like these walked the line between attraction and revulsion with an elegance that only centuries could understand. The sun is setting now over the water, painting the sails of merchant ships in gold. You hear laughter in a dozen languages, smell 10 different histories riding the breeze, and feel something stir beneath your feet like the memory of movement, of trade, of endless roads and dusty markets. You've tasted what the world has forgotten. You've walked among the shadows of flavor and story, and even now, as the world sleeps, these spices wait, in soil, in sea, in secret. Let them whisper, let them linger. The harbor fades behind you, and your step slow as the road grows softer. The wind now is quiet, the kind that brushes your cheek like a lullaby, tugging gently at your cloak, carrying the last sighs of cinnamon, resin, and rain-damp earth. The sun has tucked itself away, and above you, stars blink awake one by one, patient and familiar. You loosen your pack, its weight eased by memory, a tear of mastic wrapped in cloth, a pinch of sumac in a paper cone, a whisper of galangal clinging to your fingers. These aren't just spices, they're stories folded in time, waiting to be remembered each time a pot is stirred, or a breath is drawn deep over a simmering bowl. You hear laughter from a distant courtyard, the soft clink of a cup, a fire crackles nearby, its smoke rising in lazy spirals, scented faintly with pepper and rose. Someone hums a melody you don't recognize, yet somehow feel you've always known. Tonight, there are no more roads to follow, no ships to catch, just this moment. This stillness dies so you lie back on the cool earth. Feel its slow heartbeat beneath you, and let your mind drift. Let it follow the spice roots backward, through centuries of scent and silence, until all that's left is warmth. You're safe now. Your home. Sleep. Let them linger.